just declare the council meeting open and welcome everybody, including members of the public and the speakers in the public forum as well. Just remind everybody that the meeting is live streamed, so if you're speaking, please use the microphone, councillors, so that that can be heard as well as being seen. Just call for any apologies, but there aren't any because we're all here. And so the first item is a nice thing to do, and that's to recognise the 25 years service of a staff member, Debbie Bull. So I'll just stand and read a few things to embarrass Debbie. But Debbie began working in the library in 1994, and nobody in those days apparently had heard of RFID tags. Neither have I, actually, but anyway, community hubs or the internet, really, let alone using public computers. So Debbie initially was a shelf tidier before moving to the returns team, and eventually her current position performing acquisition tasks with the collections team. So Debbie is a quiet achiever who works in a position that doesn't often get much attention. Sometimes I wish for that myself, actually, but is nonetheless critical to the successful running of the library. Among many other things, she receives new items into the library, pays invoices, performs cataloguing tasks. She's got a huge wealth of experience built up over that 25 years, and she's willing to share, takes the initiative where she sees that something can be improved upon, and is willing to take on new tasks and challenges within her role. So that makes her a very valuable person to have in the constantly changing environment in which libraries operate. And Debbie's teammates also appreciate her well-rounded sense of humour, extensive catalogue of laughs and dry observations that come with impeccable comic timing. Might have to get you on the stage at some stage, and much team spirit. So as well as her work in the library, Debbie has assisted the digital services team when they've needed an extra pair of hands, and volunteered in the command centre during the RENA incident. In recent years, she has demonstrated extreme resilience, being the first winner of the TCC Boot Camp Challenge and continuing to attend long after the challenge finished. And despite the reputation of the instructor as an inflictor of great pain. So I think there's a lot of hard work involved in TCC Boot Camp. So Debbie, just in conclusion to say we're proud to have you as part of our team and look forward to working with you for many years to come. So I'll just come forward and present you. And then as part of council meetings, we have the opportunity for public forums, which people can register to speak. And there are two speakers today. First, Susie Edmonds about Bella Vista, and second, Heather Grace, and that's regarding the pruning of notable trees. So we allow 10 minutes for each person to speak. So Susie, would you want to come up and take one of these chairs, and someone help with the microphone? Is there a... Okay, Susie, so you're welcome, and it's up to you to use the 10 minutes how you wish. If you do happen to finish early, there might be time for questions, but we'll just see how that goes.
It's unlikely. Thanks. I will run over time. So.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll have a drink.
The time is just there somewhere, I think. There we go.
Oh, right, sure. Is that because I'm short? Is that what
no.
You're saying? Oh, okay, just checking. I have with me Sam Bailey as a support person. Oh, thank you. Right, just get myself together here. It's a bit of a nerve-wracking experience, as you'd imagine. So I've written what I want to say today simply because I probably do feel a bit nervous. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to make this presentation to Council this morning. On behalf of the Tauranga City Council Exposed Group 2019, I have no wish to make matters personal, as I think most people are inherently good people, honest and doing what they believe is right. So personal attacks can be unhelpful. However, some people do have official roles, and in some situations, names have to be used. That cannot be avoided. I am hopeful going forward that we can all try a little harder to be respectful, professional, and not personal in our approach to an issue. Our group are not haters or toxic people, as has been stated in chambers and the media, and we are all decent, just like yourselves. Our brief opportunity today to speak in this forum is not likely to be seen by Tauranga City Council excuse me, as kind or appreciative. We offer no apology for that. My initial approach in June last year to His Worship the Mayor and to the Deputy Mayor, and to meet and show what we believed councillors did not know was happening in administration, was made in good faith. That request was ignored from the outset. This was bizarre. Given the intent, rejection was not justified, fair or reasonable, as it was my intent to enlighten elected members of what was actually happening behind your backs. The block out by councillors was very weird. I have never experienced a block out and such unwillingness to hold open talks in all of my time in dealing with authorities, local government, central government, or over many years. This I find quite unbelievable and totally unacceptable in the name of transparency. I'm just going to stop for water. In recent days, we've learnt a lot about how the councillors have been kept in the dark in various projects by council, and we have compelling evidence that this has been happening in relation to Bella Vista. We offered councillors this evidence, but councillors blacklisted us as much as we tried to get alongside you. Councillors' stance in March, on the 26th of March 2019, in Chambers, over the Bella Vista crisis is to simply just move forward. However, councillors cannot do this without addressing the significant baggage and stigma this issue now carries with it. As a city and a community, we must make amends. It is essential that we as a community establish the truth. The wrongdoings must be identified and confirmed. Then those responsible must be then held to account, whoever they are, and where possible, compensation sought. The disarray some of the staff and consultants have created cannot be swept under the carpet or ignored for much longer. The Why investigation will no doubt have found many issues with staff and consultants and are probably currently being dealt with. These issues cannot be ignored or dismissed because of the sheer scale of the massive financial cost to the ratepayers of the city and the personal devastation this crisis has forced on the Tauranga community, especially the homeowners, contractors and suppliers alike. Families have been destroyed. Council must take responsibility for the damage caused to so many. It is councillors' jobs to ultimately see that justice is served, amends are made, and most importantly, that the community is informed about how and why. The MBIE report states on page 17 that MBIE is satisfied that the Council's failure in in properly performing regulatory functions is self-evident from the ultimate demise of the Bella Vista development, and sees no reason to revisit Honourable Paul Heath QC's findings. It was that obvious. In other words, it is clear from MBIE, Bella Vista's failed development, it should have been Tauranga City Council caused the Bella Vista development to fail, and in so devastating the lives of none less than 21 families. Council cannot simply dismiss the duty of care and responsibility of all the evidence we have. We won't let that happen, and we won't let you fob us off. Further, it is our view, based on the evidence available to us, that homeowners were deceived as to the truth on site, as many homes may have only needed minor remedial works to bring them to a code compliance certificate. That important BDC remedial graph report that was hidden until we released it was withheld by TCC. Why? The picture painted for councillors was, from the start, very much different to the facts known to TCC. Why? Councillor Morris phoned me on the 18th of February this year, and in that call I told him I had asked the Deputy Mayor and the Mayor to arrange councillors to meet confidentially. Councillor Morris questioned why confidentially and stated, and I quote, "We have got a public transparent process. You can come in and put the case transparently." He added, "Business is transacted in public. This is not how we have been treated at all. We have been ostracised and discredited. To date, councillors and council have many closed meetings, and much of council's business has not been transacted in public over Bella Vista. As there is only 10 minutes to deliver on this astronomical issue, I am tabling a report today. It is available on our website. It will also be linked through the Tauranga City Council Exposed Facebook page. The report is being sent directly to several politicians, including the appropriate ministers, the Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition, leaders of New Zealand First, Green Party and ACT. It is also being sent to the CEO of MB, the Auditor General's Office, and various concerned and interested parties. This community deserves the truth instead of the constant litany of lies. Thank you. So if you've got any questions...
Any councillors, anybody got a question? Councillor Robson?
Falls of Rush Inn. Look, I appreciate, Susie, the passion and clearly the sincere belief that you're sort of evidencing. But in what I've heard, I haven't heard or seen or been presented with any evidence for this litany of lies or whatever the final closing words were. So I suppose that's the challenge for me. Now, I'm guessing you want me to go to this report that you've tabled. Is that correct? You want us all individually to go and read that report you've tabled publicly?
So through the chair, I'd like to say, yes, this report is for you all to read. It is given to you today because we have not been able to give you evidence because you have blocked us out. It is also, when you say that you haven't seen anything, you haven't accepted any invitation to see the information that we have. So that comment is actually a bit obscure.
Okay, thanks, Susie. And so you're tabling that, so who will you be giving that to, just so it can be circulated to us? Yeah.
I will give it to you,
Yep.
Mr. Brownless, His Worship.
Greg will do.
Greg.
Thank you.
My friend.
Okay, that's fine. And we'll circulate to council. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and our next speaker is Heather Grace, and it's regarding a request for pruning of notable trees on private property. So, welcome, Heather.
Thank you, Mayor Greg and councillors. Thanks for having me here today for 10 minutes. My name's Heather Grace, but I'm here not just for me, I'm here for a group of residents who are negatively impacted by the 3 notable trees at the addresses of 45, 49 and 53 Wakefield Drive in Bethlehem. Now, you will have all received in your pack quite a bit of reading about this, but I know you're very busy people and you have a lot to read, so I'll just recap the key facts quickly. These 3 trees have been protected since 1995 when the subdivision was first developed, and if you can imagine back then it would have been bare land and these 3 trees would have been the only beauty in sight. So I can fully understand why they were protected at that time. However, now this is a very built-up area and these trees are jammed in between houses. The trees have grown fast. Year on year they grow taller and wider, and they are now far too large for their location. They are also a hazard to people and to property. Every year in the storms, fairly large branches fall off these trees into our backyards, and we're talking 8 properties that these trees are overhanging. My husband and I, a couple of years ago, took a whole trailer load of very long branches to the tip. I'm saying taller than me and about this in diameter. If that was to fall on a person, it would certainly cause injury. But the landowners are not allowed to prune these trees. And also I wanted to note that, as we'll see in this coming slides, other trees are now giving amenity value to the area. Past requests for pruning have proven difficult. Because these are notable trees, resource consents are required. There's a very high cost to property owners. The arborist that gets sent out to talk to us when we make noises about pruning is very, very helpful and friendly, but he admits that he cannot prune anything more than what you can do with secateurs on these trees because they are notable trees, so he's not able to help either. These trees are public assets. They're protected for public amenity value, but right now the landowners are bearing the burden. Let's have a little look at the street. This is a picture of Wakefield Drive in Bethlehem, and as you can see, there's lots of trees. It's a very beautiful area, and if I highlight those other trees we're talking about here sticking out high above the rest. Let's have a look at the location. The little 3 green blobs I've drawn on this map is where the trees are, and you can see that about 100 metres down the road you have Belvedere Reserve. This is a beautiful park with lovely big trees in it that are available for all the public to enjoy. However, these 3 trees, protected trees that are jammed between houses, are not available for any public to enjoy. And if you have a look at the map, go back. If you have a look, you can see the shadow that they cast on the 3 properties in Edwin Grove. You can't even see anything in there. There's houses underneath those trees that are completely in the shadow. Here's a view from Wakefield Drive looking at the 3 trees, and you can see how large they are. Council records show that they are in excess of 30 metres high, 30. There's another view showing a house that looks like it's getting engulfed by trees. That's a backyard view of 2 trees, and you can see how much they overhang in the property. There's another one there. These long limbs stretch quite a way into people's property. My husband is not a short man, and he made 13 long strides to get to the end of where the branches reach. This is the view from Edwin Grove on the other side. So you can see that these trees absolutely tower over the properties, dropping branches, leaves and other debris. If these trees were on private land and not protected, they would be managed by the landowners. In that case, overhanging branches to a neighbouring property would be considered a nuisance, and the owners of the trees would be required by the council to trim back the branches to the boundary. But notable trees on private land are managed not by us, but by the council. These overhanging branches are a nuisance and a hazard, a real hazard. But property owners are not allowed to prune or manage these trees. Yes, the trees were there first, I hear you say, before the houses. But the truth is that these trees in the last 24 years have doubled in size. They keep getting bigger and bigger because they haven't been pruned and maintained. London plane trees, which is what these are, grow to 40 metres tall and 25 metres wide. That is not an acceptable size to be jammed in between houses. Currently, according to the council website, the council maintains 21,000 street trees, 8,000 trees in reserves, and 339 trees like these on private property, plus 10 groups of trees on private land. That's a lot of trees. The council has a responsibility to maintain all of these public amenity assets, and council protected trees on private land are public amenity assets. Street trees are pruned to meet the vegetation and tree management policy. Protected trees on private property also need pruning to comply with the policy. In a nutshell, the policy section I'm referring to basically says that trees should be maintained to an appropriate size and shape for their location, and they should be managed to avoid safety risks to people and property. There are a wide number of pruning options. As you can see, most pruning options do not reduce the size of the tree significantly, which is why I mentioned the term pollarding in my written report. Now, I know that looks shocking and it looks ugly and people are going to be horrified looking at that, but never fear. When you pollard a tree, the leaves grow back vigorously and form a nice new ball of vegetation. This is a joint request from the 8 people that these trees overhang. We would like the council to reduce the size of these trees to approximately half their height and half their width, or smaller if possible. Basically back to the size they were when the council first protected them 24 years ago. We would also like the council to maintain an appropriate size for the location, and we are suggesting an annual pruning schedule. As these are public amenity assets, we would consider it appropriate for the council to pay for these maintenance costs and resource consent costs and removal of the resulting debris. Thank you for listening. I've got a couple of minutes for questions. My wish is that we could get this rolling now, because winter pruning is best for these trees, and there could be time to get them organised and prune in winter this year.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, Heather, for coming in. I'm sitting to your right.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Thank you for your comprehensive presentation, and the photos say 1,000 words. In your submission that you've written to us, you say regarding change of status of trees, and if I can just quote you, we're aware council may decide to change the status of these trees and remove them from the notable tree register. But I wonder whether you understand the process. It's a notable tree under the city plan review, and it's got to go through a city plan review change process.
Sure. I was not suggesting that council should do that. I was simply acknowledging that the council has the right to change the status of trees. As they did a few years ago, there was a whole round of submissions, and there were quite a few trees that came off that register at that time. It was not my suggestion that they do that at all.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. That was a very, very good presentation, and I'm struggling to think anybody here would not be in support and sympathy with what you're putting up with. You are suggesting that pollarding, but I believe the probably the appropriate thing long term is simply to remove the trees. Would that not be your preference? Because, you know, why would we spend money ongoing all the time when you've already pointed out in the area there is no lack of trees? There is really good amenity, and perhaps I would want to move a notice of motion at some time to actually support what you're wanting to have done. I'd just like to be clear that if that was an option, to just simply, we still have to go through the resource consent process,
Yes.
and it should be at council's expense, in my opinion. But would you be in support of simply having the trees removed, planting new ones if necessary, whatever, let the landowners
As
do
long
what
as they're
they wanna
not
do.
ones that grow to 40 metres high.
Yeah, exactly. So would you support that?
Well, our aim is not to get them removed. That's not what we're here for. Our aim is to have them managed. But in the end, if it is better because of the ongoing costs of the pruning, if it is better to remove them and plant more appropriate species, then I would support that.
Yeah, it seems to be akin to keeping an ostrich in a budgie cage, doesn't it? They're just not in the right place, no matter how wonderful they are. Through you, Your Worship, to staff, time and cost for the process suggested by Councillor Larry Baldock as an option, and to be honest, at the moment supported by myself as seconder. Time and cost to effect removal. Can we get some idea?
I'm just going to ask the General Manager to see if we could report back to the next Project Services meeting about that, but just with some knowledge of the Resource Management Act under which these come, unfortunately, if we could make a proposal, and depending on if there were any objections received, that could be quite small, but just one objection can lead to a lengthy process. But I'm not sure if, Margaret, did you want to say something?
Oh, just that we're happy to report back at the next meeting, so thank you.
I would just mention that over the years there have been a few individual requests to remove individual trees, and because that requires a big public submission process, there have been various groups in other parts of Tauranga that have objected. We feel that pruning them to half the size is something that is doable without that process, whereas removing them could open a different can of worms.
We'll ask for the options on both as far as that goes. You know, how quickly could a pruning being done versus the other. Yeah. Well, look, thanks very much, Heather, for coming in, and also thanks for the way you submitted on that. That was great.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you. There's no chairperson's report except to state that with this meeting today and different people coming at different times, I'll probably need the flexibility to make some changes to the agenda order that I can't tell you now. In other words, we've got people coming at 1 o'clock. That's the MB report. So that gentleman will be here at 1, and followed by Max Pedersen's report. So we know that will be then, but we may, for example, bring other items forward to fill in various gaps, and we'll just have to do that as we go along. Any late items? Any confidential business to be transferred into the open? Change the order of the business, as I say, we'll just have to do it, but we will definitely keep that. The MB person will be here at 1, then followed by the 4 reports written by Max Pedersen, so we know the timing for that. Okay, going on to confirmation of minutes, matters arising in adoption. So we'll probably need to take city transformation, audit, transport, economic development, community and environment as each individual one. We can't really do those en masse, and then we'll look at the 2 council meetings after that. So first minutes of the City Transformation Committee of the 3rd of December. Yeah. So that's moved by Councillor Baldock and seconded by, yep, Councillor Clout. Now, any queries or discussion on that? Okay, so I'll put those ones all in favour, say aye. Aye. Against, cancelled. And now we're going on to the Audit, Finance, Risk and Monitoring Committee on 19th of February. Okay, so that's moved by Councillor Clout, seconded by Councillor Robson. Any questions, queries? Yes?
Just in relation to the Main Street reports on page 33, there is a staff in response to a question. It reads as though it falls under the downtown Tauranga, well, the downtown Tauranga Main Street Organisation report, but in fact it was relating to the Mount. The Mount Monganui manager wasn't present, the table report was tabled, and that was one of the questions that rose out of the tabled report. So we just need to reflect that that's related to the Mount Main Street, not downtown Tauranga, please.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Through the chair to Marty, our Chief Executive. Marty, could you please ensure that the items for staff follow-up, that there's some process in place for that, because there's, you know, here and there throughout the agenda some items that haven't been followed up. So I don't know whether it's a lack of a computer program or whatever, but I'll leave that to you if you could follow it up, please.
Against, so that's carried. Now, Transport Committee, 26th of February, the minutes for that. Moved by Councillor Kurak, seconded by Councillor Malloy. Any points or follow-up? Yes, Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 6 of the Transport Committee minutes, page 46 of the agenda, there's a matter arising from the previous Transport Committee meeting regarding Council's request to police to increase monitoring of driver behaviour in Arataki. It was being followed up and would be reported back by email. I haven't received any communication on that as of yet, or it's gone missing.
Through the chair, we did request the police to do enhanced enforcement in that area. I thought we had sent an email out to elected members on that as an update, but I'll follow up, and if it hasn't been sent, I'll get it sent. Yep.
Through you to Martin as well. Under the James Hughes report, Mr. Campbell from NZTA said that parties have been contacted about the transporters parking in the bus lanes, and that was being addressed. But apparently it's still happening, so can we go back to NZTA and just let them know that there are transporters still parking on Hewletts Road?
We will follow up with through our enforcement team and NZTA.
Martin, thank you. In terms of the that same submitter and the reference to the bus lane around the B2B project, are you familiar with NZTA processes in terms of progressing with that? Potentially you could update us as to where that's at, please.
I'm not familiar where that discussion has got to at the moment, but we are trying to open that discussion further with NZTA and the Regional Council with regards to the potential for some bus priority measures as part of the Baylink project, but we haven't gotten into any detail just yet around that.
I'll put those, all in favour say aye. Against, so that's carried. Then Economic Development and Investment Committee, 18th of December. Okay, so I'll put those, all in favour say aye. Against, so that's carried. And then Community and Culture, 14th of February. Councillor Malloy, seconded by Councillor Brown. Any points, discussion? Yep, Councillor Stewart.
Through the chair, I just wonder, please, if we could add a few words to page 66, the third to last bullet point. Second to last bullet point, talking about Norfolk Pines. It says resource consent would be required to replant Norfolk Pines, and my suggestion is, for clarity, to add the words because of city plan rules. Thank you.
That's correct. Yes. Yeah. Although I'm beginning to think, that, what about existing use rights? But we won't get into that. Yes, Councillor Brown.
I have discussed this with committee advisor, but on page 66 we've adjourned obviously for lunch because it's 30 minutes. Then there's a gap of half an hour, and there's no discussion in the minutes. So we just need to find out what happened in that half-hour time. So we adjourned, reconvened, but there's no record of anything happening in that half hour. So would would have been discussion of some sort, but there's a gap there that needs to be filled.
Well, we'll get staff to just check into that. I think it's probably just a timing of the times. Okay, so I'll put that all in favour, say aye. Against, so that's carried. Environment Committee, 18th of February. Yeah, moved by Councillor Morris, seconded by Councillor Mason. Any discussion on any of those matters? Yep, Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I believe that methyl bromide was raised at that meeting, so I just wondered if one of the bullet points that could be added in with the list that's already there on page 79, please, regarding the Regional Council's update to us.
Sulfur dioxide and various other things, so you'd like methyl bromide added to that. That's fine. Mr. Chair, that's okay with you? Yep. Okay, so put that all in favour, say aye. Against, that's carried. And then we've got two council, the minutes from the 5th of March and the 19th of March, which we can take together. I'm happy to move, and seconded by Councillor Clout. Just have a look and see if you've got any points that you wish to make there. Okay, so I'll put that all in favour, say aye. Aye. Against, so that's carried. Thanks very much. Declarations of conflict of interest. No. And going on to the business proper, first of all is a recommendation from the Policy Committee of 19th of March, page 104. Regarding the water supply, so Councillor Morris and seconded by Councillor Clout. Councillor Morris, do you want to say any little, reasonably self-explanatory? Anybody else have any comments or discussion? Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, I just would highlight that there were amendments, very small amendments made as best we could to address the concerns, to make it absolutely clear that there is no prohibition on our water supply being used for dust suppression and for development, land development and so on, but rather we're doing all we can to comply with the Regional Council's requirements that we have investigated every way in which we can use alternative supplies before we turn to our reticulated supply. For that, there's been some misunderstanding in the community. I think that somehow there was now a ban on it. That is not the case, and I trust that the amendment that was made to just put it in as a specific use of water, that we have been able to alleviate some of that concern. We can't allow, because it always occurs in the summer when the earthwork season is on, we can't allow land development to be held up because we can't, suppress dust and so on, all of which are environmental concerns just as important. We've got to release as much land as we can for housing supply, as we know. So I trust that those slight amendments have been of benefit.
Any other points? Okay, so I'll put that all in favour, say aye. Aye. And Councillor Brown, I noticed you abstained on the first one. That's all I was just wondering if... Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. No, that's fine. So no. So all in favour, say aye. Aye. So against, so that's carried. Thank you. The next is DC 56, which is an update on Our Place. And please note that there's not that where it says the summary of the issue. That's what happened in December the 18th, and so probably what we'll just be doing is receiving the report. Don't misread it as a further request. Okay, so anybody like to speak? Yes, thank you.
Yep, so late last year it was brought to your attention the financial situation of Our Place. There was some work undertaken to come up with options to address this. There was a sponsorship program, and council put 60,000 towards that. And this is a really progress report. It shows that they're moving in the right direction in terms of the number of tenancies, increase in tenancies, and more funding with the sponsorship program. The LTO has been extended, and the report recognises that decisions made around the civic rebuild, there's potential there for further extension of that LTO space.
Any questions on the report? Good to see. Seems to be going. Councillor Stewart.
Through the Chair, I've got a question, but it's in the confidential, so I'll ask it later on. Yeah, thank you.
Somebody want to move that, it's not actually written down, but that we received the report. Yeah, moved by, yes, sure. Yeah.
Chairman, if I just may, there was a request from the, what is it called, the Hospitality Association, about how the decisions were made. I just wanted to clarify it maybe here in this meeting so they can get that information. And Hemi, you could confirm the extension of the licence to occupy was done by the City Transformation Committee, because the committee had the scope to do so, and then separately the $60,000 sponsorship grant was through the council. He was trying to find the minutes to see when it had occurred, but I just to clarify that publicly, that that has been extended to July 2020 as the report says, and it was done in that committee. So
cool.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think I had moved receipt by Councillor Cloughton. I missed the seconder. Was it Councillor Baldock? So any discussion? Any other discussion? Okay, so I'll put that all in favour. Say aye. Aye. Against. So that's carried. Then preparation for 2019 local elections, I think is what it should say, which is DC 84.
Morning, everyone. First of all, apologies for trying to go back to 2016. This is actually 2019. Humble apologies. So this is an update on preparations for the elections for you, for the local body elections. So we have a couple of things that we need to decide. One is, of course, the order of votes, how you would like to proceed with that. So you can choose either alphabetically or in a pseudo-random order or in a totally random order. So I think just about all of you have been here before, so probably have an opinion on it. So that's one of the decisions. Also, we've done some changes to the maps, for the signs for where you can put up the election signs. Some of them due to just safety concerns and roading changes, and that is attached to the revised policy, the local elections policy, which we've got, and we're minor changes here to take into account the changes that we made to the street use bylaw. And you can see the changes in your papers just in red, really updating the dates in that bylaw, revised bylaw. And the other thing that we just wanted to point out was the just a brief review of the comms, what we think is appropriate for us to be putting out in the community here is around encouraging people to vote, explaining STV to people, and also encouraging people to stand for election. So just the simple. So those would be the things that we would be looking to communicate to the community. Any questions?
Yeah, just in relation to the ordering of the names, of course, I always move that it should be alphabetical, but I lose every time. No, I'll be happy to move in random order at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman, because I think it's the only fair way to do it. But I've got questions about the signage, street signage, with the maps. Last election, it was very helpful that staff in preparation put marks on the road, and I hope that that will occur the beginning and the end of the zone, so that there is no, some get up at midnight and go out and put it at the front, and then they find someone else has arrived at a new front. Those marks are very helpful.
We've been speaking to the enforcement team about how we're going to monitor and manage that. So they'll be coming together with a plan around that. Yeah.
Secondly, the enforcement is important. It is very frustrating, as having been a candidate on many occasions, sometimes successful and sometimes unsuccessful. When you see breaches that are not addressed quickly, it is frustrating for not only us but the public too. We have these rules for a reason, so can we be assured that there will be some people going out and actually removing signs and requiring candidates to come and get them and put them in the proper place?
We have been having that conversation with the enforcement team. Unfortunately, Stu's not here at the moment, but we've been talking with him about that to make sure that it is enforced.
I've felt motivated there's sometimes little rabbits pop up with election signs in very inappropriate places, and I wanted to go and stomp on them. What would be the situation if the public took it into their own hands to remove signs that are in the wrong place?
I don't actually know the answer to that.
I imagine it would be you're not allowed to take the law into your own hands. That's I would think.
My final question would be, some of these yellow lines on our maps, they are very long, and like there's one outside the racecourse, for example, where we're limited to one sign in those places. I just wondered if it may be worth, on some of those, splitting them, having a little gap so it's actually two spaces, because this is what happens. People go and stick two up there, and there are a number of them that are very lengthy, so it should be clear anyway whether this is one sign for the whole area, or because in some places there are splits because you've got a driveway in the middle, and so then you'd be going one there and one there. And could we just have a look into that, please, if we could? Thank you.
Yeah, look, democracy is a serious business, and councils are not blessed with high turnout. Councillors are not blessed with a significant amount of public trust, unfortunately, according to most research. In fact, the Auditor General at a recent mini conference in Hamilton, sort of made the theme of the conference effectively sort of restoring trust and confidence in the public sector, having noted that under the international sort of corruption perception index, New Zealand had lost its #1 spot, and he wanted it back. So it's now Denmark have got it on their own. We used to share it with Denmark. In that regard, I suppose this is a question to staff. In Queensland, donations from property developers to local government politicians are illegal. I think the same thing applies in New South Wales. Could staff confirm that it's not within council's gift to effectively ban such donations, that it's not within our power to do that? And could they also confirm that it's not within our power to demand that those sorts of donations are made public before election day? Because I have had conversations with people and they find the situation in New Zealand kind of strange, local people. So could we confirm that it is not within our power? Or is it within our power?
Yeah, I don't think that's something that's governed by each local authority. It's governed by legislation. So we can find out the answer to that, but I don't believe that we have the power to make those decisions.
More's the pity.
Just coming to the Welcome Bay area, if we could throw the map on the screen, I'll be able to explain it a little easier for you. We're talking about the signs in around the page there is
while we get that map up, can I get Councillor Malloy to do his, just for the timing? Yep, so Councillor Malloy, and then...
Yes, with the up and coming election, just want to make sure that we're able to put in photoshopped ID photographs on the side of the road, that is all right, and and also any misleading or inaccurate figures that are put on signs, are we able to challenge those?
We're happy to provide any potential candidates all the legislation and rules they require to guide them through the forthcoming election.
And just on that point, there will be a session with Warwick and election comms around all those rules and regulations. I think that's already booked into your calendars, so you'll be able to ask all those questions of him as well.
Councillor Malloy. Now, Councillor Granger.
Yeah, thanks. Look, just a little concern to those two areas there, close to the traffic lights, the cross section by Hammond Street. I just feel, and we've been noted in previous elections, that they shouldn't be or be a deterrent, especially for people coming up to the likes of those lights or roundabouts, etc. So those two areas there, I think, would be a little bit of a concern. Could that be noted and perhaps come back to us on that?
The locations of the signs were undertaken with our transport engineer to go around and have a look to see whether or not they are in appropriate locations given where they are. The idea with those that are, the one that's very close to the retirement village is set back from the road.
No, I'm not worried about that one. The other two that I'm referring to are the ones close to the traffic signals on the other side.
The one that's on... Given the, I want to say, topography of the land, I don't know how to use this thing. Yeah, there we go. Because of the hillside that it's on, it's a safe location for candidates to be able to pull off onto that side road to put up their election signs, as well as it being away from the line of sight. Well, you can still see them when approaching that round. Those lights, but the idea is that it's safe enough location for candidates to put up their lights, as well as the members of the public to be able to safely see these signs. The same goes for the ones down here. They are away from the road. They are there so that the public can see the signs from the other location, given we only allow one sign per yellow line.
Understand, but I think you missed my point. It's just that they're both in around those traffic light areas, and for me, any deterrent, any distraction, I think is a major problem. So the thing is for me, there's such an area of land. If you're coming from the underpass into Welcome Bay Road, on the left-hand side, if you want to point that direction.
Okay, I'll just get
no.
to speak to that. Just hold on.
Yeah, through the chair, if there's any sites like this that elected members have concerns about from a safety perspective, we'll happily review those sites. Obviously, they were looked at by our traffic safety engineers to start with, but we can remove those sites from the list if there's a concern around safety.
So we would need to pass something today that gave you that ability to, subject to traffic safety. I think we've got to be careful that we don't try and restrict too much. It's that getting the balance right. But we take the point, and we'll get Martin and his team to look into it. Yeah.
It shouldn't be one that would be restricting those sort of things. The point I'd want to make though is just on the left-hand side. If you want to throw that coming through there through the lights. No, Welcome Bay. Yeah. Now on the left-hand side, at the top side. No. Coming from the city through the traffic lights to Welcome Bay Road. Thank you, that's great. Which button do we push on here? In this area here, from there and around the corner to about here. There's such a large area there, there's no lights, there's no crossings, it's quite simple. Large open area, common sense, why isn't it thrown there? Just thought I'd throw that in.
Okay, so we'll get that looked into before we make it. Now I've got Councillor Stewart, Baldock and Robson and Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the appropriate time, I would like to move that we do away with the maps and go back to how we ran it before the maps were put in place, as I think they are restrictive, and I am concerned about some of the safety issues that Councillor Grange has raised too. So at the appropriate time, I'd like to move that. Thank you.
Indicated I would be happy to move resolution when it comes in. An amendment could follow perhaps, but I'll wait till then.
Being the sort of council that is starting to look forward and think about the implications of what it does, the slip lane, one would hope in Welcome Bay, will be up and running next election period. Come the election period, which is some months away still, although some people are clearly in election mode today, and someone started yesterday if I read the paper right. Could we not allow signs on the slip road, given it'll be taking a third of the traffic? It seems, just in anticipation, it would seem crazy at this point not to anticipate the possible opening of that road and at least allow signs there, so someone can indicate where that is, where the slip lane is. But as one's sort of heading, effectively looking at that map, west on the slip lane, to the south of the slip lane, it appears there is significant space there where one, just there, thank you, Councillor Granger.
Just along
there will be significant traffic should Councillor Granger gets its way on that road, and obviously it would make a wonderful place for him and others, hopefully, to put their signs.
Thank you,
It's a serious comment, and it sort of plays to a certain extent to Councillor Stewart's observation that when we start restricting things, we've got to, I think, go on the side of the more communication candidates can have with the electorate, the better. And the more numbers and facts, better still.
Thank you. Te Okara Drive is now open, so can we consider that as one of the options, given when we put this together the road wasn't open, but it is now?
Well, that can be considered. I think the main thing is, in the end, we really, to keep it independent, once that goes, we really need to give it to our transport staff and let them make the decision, because otherwise it's a bit like us. Not everybody gets a go, including those who aren't in council at the moment, as to where to put the signs. So just have to be a little, So I think it's good to raise these things and then leave it to the staff to make an independent decision of us. Okay, so Councillor Bullock, you did indicate you'd like to move, and then after that, Councillor Stewart might wish to have an amendment.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I'll move A, B with option 3 in random order, and C and D.
Just one question I have on that is that how does that give the staff now the flexibility to look at those issues that have been raised? Because are we signing off on those places where signs can be at the moment, or not, or is there still some room to move there? Sorry, yes, thank you.
If you take the resolutions as read, that means you're accepting the signage as located in those maps. If you wish to allow us some flexibility to be able to amend those maps, then you would need to amend the resolution.
Okay. Would like to amend it in that case to just work on that.
Get the wording right for that, so it might just require don't anybody leave the room, but can we have a minute to get that? Okay, so do not leave the room, and meantime, if you can just work on to get the wording right with staff, and I'll get Councillor Brown, you've got a question. While they're doing that, Councillor Brown.
Just wanted to check, we're talking about in the communications, we're talking about that council will run a campaign targeting youth, but the Youth Advisory Group are also working on something. So are they both the same project?
Just allow the CE to approve minor amendments
Okay.
Does that work for everybody?
Yeah. Yep. Keeps it independent. So, so do you want to, so the wording then would be, with C would be amends the local election policy as attached in Appendix A, and do you want to put an extra, a separate resolution saying allow the CE to...
Subject to.
Oh, subject to...
Minor amendments.
Subject to minor amendments authorised by the CE, yeah. Fine to me, subject to, oops, yeah, subject to minor, just leave make out of it, subject to minor amendments approved by the CE. Yeah. Okay. Right, so you moved, Councillor Baldock, seconded Councillor Clout. Do you want to speak to it before there's... Yeah.
I will speak to it and then see what amendments come, but in terms of option 3, I think it makes sense. We have to be as fair as we can. Some of us were blessed with wonderful names and others were not, but the days are long gone when people could, you know, influence things in their favour. I think enforcement is really important. I may sound like a control freak, but I believe, you know, laws should be enforced, as you note when I chair a committee. And I think it's not just so that, you know, we respect laws, but it is about safety. I think I don't see any, you know, any around roundabouts, and I think they are particularly important areas for us to keep clear of election signs. As someone that witnessed an accident coming into the Greaton roundabout on Friday morning, car pulled to the side of the road that was quite mangled. Within 5 minutes, because of rubbernecking, another accident almost occurred. The car must have kissed the car in front of it. It only just stopped in time, and it was simply because their attention was drawn to a mangled car on the side of the road. If it's an election sign, if it's a bunny rabbit, if it's a doggy, whatever it is, they should not be anywhere near roundabouts or any areas where it could cause an accident, in my opinion. So I'm pleased to hear that staff are going to enforce and not just, you know, a week later ring someone, but actually as soon as it's brought to their attention, they will go and remove the sign, and it becomes the candidate's responsibility to go and put it up in the appropriate place, I hope. Finally, just in response to the comments made by Councillor Robson, it would, in my opinion, take exceptional circumstances for us to deny any member of the public from contributing to the campaign of any candidate. And I would offer to him just a little information perhaps that might explain why in Queensland or New South Wales they have done so, is because most of the land that is released for development in many Australian states is owned by the state, and therefore is at the discretion of elected members to release at different times. And I think that may be why they've taken that extraordinary, I think, step to ban contributions from property developers. It would be, you know, more likely to be open to abuse. And we know that in many Australian states they have quite serious issues with corruption within government departments, police departments and so on. We've seen movies about them for a long time. So I certainly wouldn't want to see any citizen of our country being denied the opportunity to support candidates they believe may do a good job, not just feather their nests, which is a terrible accusation to make.
Thank you very much. I endorse the sentiments of my colleague Councillor Baldock. The fairest, most obvious way is to have the names of the candidates in random order. And I note there's no extra cost associated with that, so that seems fine. As far as promoting the election campaign, I'm for anything that increases democracy, although I'd like to know what the budget is for that. So if someone can come back to us, please, with the budget for that part of the campaign promotion, that would be helpful. Single transferable vote, very simple. You just number 1, 2 or 3, 4, as far down as you want, 5 or 6. So it's not that difficult, really. It just replaces a tick with a number. So that shouldn't take too much to inform people on how that works. Thank you.
Thank you. I enjoyed the analogy of being distracted by a very attractive election sign and having an accent. I can imagine. I have to admit, Councillor Baldock does look very nice on election signs, and there is no airbrushing, I believe. He does look very well, none at all. Very, very well done. So good, full, handsome head of hair. In terms of political donations, what I would suggest is that individual candidates, or perhaps a group of people, could set up a voluntary register whereby they declare any donations received before the election, and they encourage other candidates to do so. I would suggest that if a candidate chooses to be conspicuous by their absence, that may speak volumes, but a voluntary register that is publicly available, set up by candidates, I'll certainly take part in that, in which all donations are declared before polling day, would be the most transparent way to go about things. Doesn't reduce anybody's right to contribute to a campaign, but make sure that the electorate is fully informed prior to casting their ballot who is doing what in the community.
Yeah, I'm looking or anticipating an amendment to the substantive motion, but that being said, I think it is important to recognise that local government in New Zealand has a particular relationship with land. We zone it, we decide the order of development, i.e. which developer makes money first. Let's be clear about it. Our situation is not as different from Queensland and New South Wales as some might suggest. We're dancing on the pointy end of the pin, right? I think that people declaring up front who they've taken support from is very, very important, and of course that enables everyone to understand who's supporting who and why, and of course disenfranchises no one. Honesty disenfranchises no one. Transparency disenfranchises no one. So why would we not go down that path? With regard to the communications plan, I would like to not just see the budget, and I hope it's significant because our turnout is appalling, but I'd also like to see the materials. I note there's a stress on targeting young voters, but the truth is, with a turnout of 30%, we're short across every demographic. Every demographic. So we need a significant campaign to get turnout, and it should be a positive campaign, right? At the moment, my fear is, based on some of the topics of today's meeting, the motivation for many people in this upcoming election will be negative, and that would be sad, and some would argue that maybe somehow collectively we've brought it upon ourselves. But I would like to see a strong campaign to all demographics, with stress if one wants to, on youth, no problem there, but 30% turnout, hard to call it democracy. So I look forward to I think there's an amendment coming, possibly.
Yeah, it's good to see councillors all saying that they like to see a greater turnout. I hope that's genuine, and that certainly occurs. I'd like to echo some of the points about about the incredible need for a greater turnout and more diversity and range within our wider population. And in particular, I think I'd like to appeal to our friends in the media This is so important. They've got obviously a much greater reach than we do, and with the greater integration of media, the traditional paper-based media, news plus social media plus radio, right across the board, there's a much greater scope to be involved in that incredible thing which is democracy. I think whatever works, I don't think we should necessarily prescribe that it be a positive campaign. I think that we should rely on the experts and say whatever works to get people to vote and vote positively and vote with awareness through the new STV system. We should applaud.
Thank you. Just first of all, before I give my proposed amendment, I support the random order and I support the voluntary political donations register. I think that's a very good idea. We don't want to restrict candidates and we want democracy before bureaucracy. Therefore, my amendment would be that council removes the requirement of placing signs in specific areas around Tauranga. And my reason for suggesting this is because there are already rules in place where you can't put on council reserves and safety reasons, etc. They're already in place, and I think as Councillor Brown raised, there are new subdivisions opening, there's areas, pockets around the area, there may be areas near a candidate's home where that person wants to perhaps put more signs, and by this is quite restrictive, and also I share Councillor Granger's concern about safety, especially at Welcome Bay. So I think the main thing is that candidates need to look after their signs, and I think that was one of the problems that maybe have kicked the maps off in the first place, is that people weren't looking after their signs properly. So I think that's the side of it, that people need to be more responsible for looking after any signage they put up, and so that the amendment would read that council removes the requirement of placing signs in specific areas rather around Tauranga. Thank you. Read it out again, seeing I didn't read it very clearly. The council removes the requirement of placing signs in specific areas around Tauranga.
If that was removed, then other laws would cover it, would they? Would it be the same laws that apply to a general election, or am I not thinking on the right track there? I know there was trouble at the general election too, and some people said they were going to put them where they liked and blah, blah, blah.
The issue with general elections is that they are governed under legislation rather than local elections, which are dealt with under this policy. All placing of signs still need to comply with our city plan, as well as our street use and public places bylaw. The reason the introduction of the maps was introduced is that it was a lot easier and cut down on a lot of cost for our administration, for our enforcement, because they knew what areas needed to be enforced, whereas when we did not have those maps and those locations very clear, it was very difficult for people to be able to have those signs removed when there wasn't compliance, because there was grey areas on what was safe and what wasn't.
Yeah, I won't be supporting it, and as Rebecca just said, you know, the reasons we put it in place was because the city was becoming just a nightmare of signs left everywhere, all over the place. It was cluttered. Some consider it to be pollution, and most of the signs are made of corflute, so they're not environmentally friendly. So therefore, we looked at, you know, trying to find a way to keep it really simple, to keep the costs of enforcement down, to keep the numbers down, so it was an even playing field, and to restrict some locations. And I think it worked really well. So I think that it should remain as status quo.
I do have a lot of sympathy for the amendment on the grounds of free speech. I certainly do. However, I think the status quo addresses that sufficiently, but also provides for the concern that the community have around visual pollution. And it never ceases to amaze me how somebody can dress up nicely, put a shirt and a tie on and a suit, and they put a sign up, and then they let that sign fall into disrepair and embarrass themselves and make the city look untidy. So I think that the element of free speech, which is important, is protected, but it also keeps our city looking tidy for our residents, and that's something which I think that they have shown a concern about in the past. But again, it's as Councillor Stewart's mentioned, it's more to do, with the individual behaviour of some candidates. They're happy to put their name and their face on something and then let it fall into disrepair.
It's said that the toughest decisions in governance are when you're choosing between two rights. And there are two rights here, as Councillor Morris has effectively alluded to. One of the issues with the restriction approach is that you actually make certain points of the city first come, first served advantage. In other words, if you get the sign placement at the beginning of certain stretches, you effectively occlude, overshadow, sort of physically, the signs of some people that you're competing against. And given there may be a significant turnout of candidates, you do wind up in a situation where, at 1 minute past midnight, you will have people, there is a practical effect of placing restrictions which is negative, right? Again, I think Councillor Morris is right that it behoves those that put up signs to actually maintain them in an orderly fashion. But I would like to see someone go through the current plan and give consideration to, giving people the opportunity to have their voice out there in space. And I think the current restrictions are too tight in certain situations. Now, whether we need to form a quick subcommittee of the sign enthusiasts amongst us to come up with some sort of more generous set of prescriptions, acknowledging the underlying issues about maintenance and management, but at the moment I'm inclined to support the motion because free speech, democracy, and not providing some people with first mover advantage, I think is really, really important.
Okay, Councillor Baldock and Mason.
Yeah, I won't support the amendment. I believe there is adequate space being provided through the city for however many candidates we have. Some of those stretches of road are very long. If people do want to be first in line, that's a choice they make. But there is room for everybody to put their signs up, and signs are a reasonably important part of election, especially for new candidates who are trying to be recognised in the community that they are standing. So there was a discussion at one point about banning signs completely. It would disadvantage those who don't have as much public profile, perhaps. But I think there's enough space. If you just go open slather, as this amendment suggests, you still have the same competition. Someone puts up a sign in a really clever place, and so everybody else goes, well, I want to be there. And you're climbing over signs again. There's just no way to really adequately deal with that. So I don't think we need to amend what is becoming now reasonable practice for us as a city to stop the pollution of signs that Councillor Brown referred to as used to occur in the past.
Yeah, I vote against the motion. There's plenty of room. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Quite right. The amendment, because of the there's plenty of room out there. In terms of the first mover advantage, so what? It rewards initiative and people who are prepared to get up early, in the middle of the night or whatever, and actually go and take the trouble to put their signs up. So I think it's a good thing. And fundamentally, what this is a safety issue. This is traffic safety. We're having an immense amount of accidents in our city right now. It's only going to get worse. And if there are random signs anywhere sort of around that distracts people, I think anything we can do to keep our people safe, we should be doing. So I will vote against the amendment.
I agree with Councillor Baldock in terms of restrictions. Hit the new candidates harder which actually might not be an advantage at this current climate. But so that's where my concern is. Some of the areas are very short, and you get a big clutter of signs, and the signs basically in that situation become invisible, and so quite worthless. There are areas which are fine, they're longer and longer stretches, and they would accommodate a number of signs with a reasonable gap between them, but there are quite a number where people just think this is crazy, and that's the feedback I got fairly on in the last campaign period, and people would have preferred, particularly I think the new candidates preferred to have it more open and accessible in terms of placement of signs. So that's why I seconded. I do support it, because it does default back to the rules that provide that, Councillor Mason, provide that safety aspect in terms of vicinity to roundabouts and intersection, as Councillor Granger pointed out. The placement, and I agree with the one proposed at Welcome Bay traffic lights. People don't need those distractions coming up to where potentially there are lines and queues if they're looking away from what's in front of them. It does seem a bit of a concern to me, but it doesn't look like we'll get through. Either way, I think having the ability to have signs, unlike other cities on where Rotorua actually bans signs completely. So either way, we're probably providing some advantage to the new candidates by even having restricted sites.
Could I just ask a question through the chair to the staff? If we did vote this in as regards to placing our signs anywhere we wished, I can remember many elections ago that we weren't allowed to place them on state highways, and that got to be a bit of an issue too, because the new candidates didn't know that some areas were state highways, some weren't. So how are we going to police that again, regards to that?
Through the chair, in regards to state highways, that's managed by Westlink on behalf of NZTA, so any complaints regarding state highways would fall to their contractors to manage. We wouldn't have any jurisdiction to remove signage on the state highways.
So in other words, as I can remember, we did have issues with those signs placed on highways, and of course it wasn't days, sometimes it wasn't weeks. It was almost a month before some of those signs were removed, so I think we had a bit of a hassle there.
I won't be supporting the amendment. I think the fact that we've got this set up does make it easier for enforcement. We've heard that already. It also encourages or discourages visual pollution, and also it lessens the safety concerns. I do hope though that the CE and staff have taken on the message that there could be room for expanding the number of areas within the city, and I think that would be the best sort of form of compromise. So if we can extend the areas where they can be placed in a safe way, then I'd be all for that. So I'll leave it up to the CE and staff. Thank you.
Your Worship, we heard a comment earlier from a councillor about significant, or tremendous I think was the word used, increase in the number of accidents. Can he give me a source for that? Because having been in receipt of accident data dating back till 2010 and having reviewed it, it seems at best overclaim. But if someone can provide me the data, I'm happy to go back and review it on my own time.
Sure, Councillor Mason, you may not have that readily available.
I read the Bay Times, and I'm worried about the number of accidents that are happening in our community. I mean, if you can't realise that there are being reported a lot of accidents in our community right now, then can't help you.
Okay, so no further speakers on the amendment. Councillor Malloy.
Yep, I won't be supporting the amendment, but just like to note that it is, I think it makes common sense what we're doing there. It does pose some problems. I know Councillor Granger gets up at some ungodly hour and puts a sign there bang on 12 o'clock, and he probably gets it within 10 centimetres of the sign. It's amazing how many other signs can squeeze into that 10 centimetres over the period of time, but no, I won't support.
Okay, so all in favour of the amendment, raise your hands. So that's Councillor Curack and Stewart and Robson, and all against, myself, Councillor Mason, Brown, Morris, Malloy, Baldock and Clout and Granger. Okay, so that amendment's lost. Back to the motion. Any others to speak on the motion?
I'd like to move another amendment, Your Worship.
Okay.
And that it's a subcommittee of councillors be appointed to review the current suggested location model and report back to the next council meeting. And if I have a seconder, I'll speak to that, but that a subcommittee of councillors be appointed to review the current location model or plan and report back to council. But I'd need a seconder, obviously.
Question, if I may, but I just wonder if that amendment isn't in contradiction to the amendment was just defeated, because why would you set up a subcommittee unless you were going to change what we just voted not to change?
I'm happy to.
Yeah, because I think there's still restrictions, but not as. I think it's a halfway point, perhaps. If it's
and that's probably the reason that you're the mayor, Your Worship. It's clearly a case that I think people sit on a continuum. A number of councillors have raised issues about we need to. We've currently handed, as is often the case, that small hot potato to staff, but I think we should give them more guidance than we've currently given them, which is they have the right to make amendments. We haven't given them a process by which amendments might be suggested. We haven't given them any direction on what might influence their judgment. I think, given this is a political issue, I think it would be good for a subcommittee of people with significant experience in winning and, in my case, losing elections to provide some input and guidance to staff. So that's the reason for it. It maintains the concept of restrictions, but gives guidance as to where they may be loosened.
Can I make a point of order? May I ask the Chief Executive, as a question, if that is not a conflict of interest? For a subcommittee of councillors, this is not about us, this is about the community. If it was a subcommittee of experts or traffic engineers or people from community potentially, but councillors, I mean, is that not open to conflict of interest?
Well, it might depend on the terms of the subcommittees.
Steve's conflict of interest, sorry.
It might depend on the terms of the subcommittee's objectives. If it was about public safety, it probably wouldn't be a conflict of interest. If it was about political opportunity or gain or advantage, it certainly would be.
It's just a question through the chair to Councillor Robson. Councillor Robson, the only thing I cannot get my head around here is the effect of what would be the perception of the people, which I think perhaps Councillor Mason was touching on. What would be the perception of the people if we control the position of those signs? I think where I'm coming from is providing guidance to the staff around the collective view. At the moment, we've effectively agreed, it looks like we will agree by majority, to restrict the placement of signs on certain conditions. We've had statements that first mover advantage is fine, and to me that goes against the very essence of democracy, which is free and open debate and no one getting an advantage at all. So all I'm suggesting is that there is a range of views, and look, that committee could be a committee of the whole effectively, but what I'm looking for is to relax some of the restrictions that I see and open up some opportunities to address issues that have been raised by various councillors. Councillor Leanne Brown has observed about, new developments. We've had the Welcome Bay slip lane in Welcome Bay. There are a number of areas, and I think we need to provide staff some guidance on this, rather than let them hang. But hey, I don't have a seconder, so
I'll see if there's a seconder. If not, yeah, right. So are you seconding it or not then? Okay. Okay, that's fine. So we're back to the substantive motion, and and amongst all that, I'll rely on your integrity if you've already spoken or not. So those that haven't spoken and wish to speak to the current motion, yes, Councillor Brown.
I'm just asking a question, probably not quite right. I'm just looking on the Whakatane website to see what their voter turnout was in 2016, and there's all the results, but there's no stats. What was the percentage turnout for Whakatane and the area around there? And can you give us your experience of what worked in Whakatane or what didn't work, please?
It was just under 50%, I think 49% across the. Well, nothing, I don't think. It's just depends on each community. They're all different across the country. And signage typically was a difficult issue to deal with as well. So I please don't expect signage police out there during the elections. Thank you.
I've just been thinking around the voluntary register of donations. And so I'd like to move an amendment that, and it will simply be that TCC accommodate on its website a voluntary register of candidate donations.
We're getting a bit beyond the. I don't have a problem with these sorts of things, but is that a matter for council? This is right, and it almost becomes electioneering. You know, I'm getting a bit concerned. Yeah. I have no problem with the voluntary thing, but when council gets involved, but it's CE, yeah.
Council and officers will be tasked with doing what the legislatively required to do throughout the election. I don't think there'll be any more or any less. So if candidates choose to do something as candidates, they're completely entitled to do that on their own volition.
Now, no more questions, and then we'll have a right of reply. Yeah, Councillor Molloy.
Yeah, I'll certainly be supporting, but I just wanted to raise some concern about the possibility of voluntary registration for donations. Sorry. That's right. Because there are numerous community organisations out there that may or may not get in behind different councillors, and if for some reason or other, you know, I'm thinking, for example, maybe Main Street or some tree lovers group or whatever, but if that meant that councillors couldn't vote or put a restriction on them, it actually is restricting democracy, I believe. Like I want to get support from the Harbour Protection Society, and you know, that would. Good luck. That would mean I wouldn't be able to vote on the walkway to Memorial Park. So we just need to be careful where we go with that. Thank you.
Other speakers? I mean, I'll just say from my point of view, obviously the election. I mean, it's a vital thing, and it's vital that it be as independent as possible, that we have as less influence as possible, and that as those people that wish to run are able to do so, and the public are able to choose them. I mean, I won't repeat that I was disappointed when council chose to change the method of election without consultation at all. So, because I actually thought that is the one thing that people should be able to decide, and that is how they choose their councillors. Unfortunately, this council chose to ignore my advice and went for a different system, and I think that is going to cause a bit of chaos, and I think it's highly anti-democratic how that happened. But that's, as I say, I'm not going to mention that. That's my bit. Councillor Robson.
Your Worship, could we take the motion after? Obviously, there's a right of reply, but when we take the motion, could we take it in parts, please? Thank you.
Right of reply. Councillor.
Yeah, I'll just comment briefly on a couple of things, but like you, Mayor Brownless, I won't mention that I was very disappointed that the council didn't take up my offer through a notice of motion to actually have a referendum on the STV issue, because I think it is a major change and it would have been good to know the community welcomed it. But I do think Councillor Clout, you know, made a good point. We need to keep it simple. It is simply just a tick instead of, or a number instead of a tick. let's not try and explain to the people how it works in the computers to spit out the result. That's where it gets, you know, very difficult. Hopefully the message can get across. A lot of comments have been made about the donation system we have, and I think they are valid. I think we're one of the countries where no one knows where your donations came from until after the election, and it is information that could be useful. But it's something we can't change, and I think the idea of a voluntary thing is a little bit of a political stunt, really, because there are some candidates who are wealthy enough to fund their own campaigns. Doesn't mean they don't have allegiances or interests and so on. So I think we just need to leave that alone. However, if Councillor Robson would consider not standing for council and standing for Parliament instead, he'd have my full support, because he could then make a change in the legislation which governs.
Point of clarification, would Councillor Baldock be prepared to make a donation to my campaign to stand for central government?
Yes, a very small one I would, yes. So that's all I'll say.
B, confirms that for the 2019 election the candidates be in random order. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, so that's carried. C, amends the local elections policy as attached in Appendix A, subject to minor amendments as approved by the CE. All those in favour say aye. Against. Okay, so all those in favour say aye. Hands up, and that's myself, Councillor Mason, Brown, Morris, Malloy, Baldock, Clout and Granger, and against is Councillor Kurak, Stewart and Robson. Okay, and then D, notes the proposed communications approach for election 2019. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against. So that's carried. So, yeah. Okay.
And until I see that, I'm not able to commit to supporting what's going to be produced.
Okay, so an abstention from Councillor Robson, note on that. Okay, so overall the motion is carried, and we'll now adjourn for 15 minutes break. Thanks. In the meeting, if any EMs are... Okay, we've started the recording again, and the meeting is resumed, and it's DC 83, Consequential Actions for Revised Committee Structure. Thank you.
So this is a follow-up to a report that was laid on the table around the terms of reference, the revised terms of reference, and a couple of consequential actions that were left to finalise. So we have revised the terms of reference, and we've added in new committees. So we've got Match Fund, we've got Dive Crescent, we've got the Event Funding Panel. We've also put Mawel in there, the Joint Administration Board, as well as attaching the Joint Governance Terms of Reference for you as well. So we had to withdraw the previous paper, which was DC 60, and revise it with this new one. And we have the same recommendations, except for one change, which is endorsing the appointment of Councillor Robson to Smart Growth, as Councillor Malloy had agreed to stand down from that committee. So the rest of it is all the same.
So any questions? Yep, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Through the chair, on page 239, the Dive Crescent Governance Group.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Is that going to report to whom? The council or project services? There's nothing there.
That should be going to the projects one.
Project services?
Yes, sorry, that's Mr.
Could that be added in, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
If we could just make a note of that, and if we can write it in ourselves.
Sure.
Okay, so you'll get that right. Okay, and Councillor Baldock.
Just had a brief chat to Kath, just that there is an independent chair appointed for the Dive Crescent Governance Group, which we agreed collectively at the group, which is Alan Tate, and so it should say, and Kath's agreed that it should say there that you can either have a co-chair, which was a pretty clumsy way of going forward, I thought, and we all agreed at the time. That was that bit, and that maybe the MOU, which was the original starting up of this group, could be made available more publicly. So that was just those two things. Oh, the other one was on Smart Growth Leadership. There seems the alternates have gone.
I'll check
Can
that
we
out
check
as
that?
well,
I think
yes.
Kelvin's the recognised alternate. That should be.
Definitely that should stay in, the alternate. Yeah. So we can fix that up. Okay. Yeah, Councillor Morris.
Thank you. Appreciate the terms of reference of the CCO working group are not yet complete, but in the chart on page 201 and the table on page 255, the working group is absent, and I was wondering whether that could be mentioned, and the line of reporting where that group reports to.
Yes, we can add that, and as you know, there's quite a considerable amount of work going into finalising those, and I think there'll be a discussion about that later, maybe during the day. Yep.
One more question. With all these terms of reference, will they be good if they were on council's websites in full, so people can see the scope, the role, the scope, and so on all those committees? Would that be?
We're in the process of actually getting them all, because there's some that have, and they've been filed in places, so we're trying to bring them all together so that everyone will be able to access them.
Sort of slightly tangential, Your Worship, but with regard to the Dive Crescent Governance Group, there was, I noticed in my diary, a possible governance to governance meeting with them, which has just been cancelled. It is a group which I think is, well, I don't really know exactly what it does, and I'd like to get more transparency, more light on. It would be helpful, I think, to get some sort of report back to a public meeting on its role and how it came about, and it would, yeah, there would be value. It's a very important part of this city, that particular piece of land, dirt, street, road, interface, gateway.
I agree. So we'll get that organised, and as you know, I've sort of banged on for a long time about the possibility of the road realignment there, which could be a provincial growth fund application, and until we get that all sorted out, we're not going to go very far with that. So, Councillor Malloy.
The ECMT, of which I am a member, East Coast Main Trunk Line. Seeing that I've been here 2.5, getting up for 3 years, we haven't yet had a meeting, so I have nothing to report.
Keep on track there, Councillor. Hold that train of thought. Oh dear, it's going to be a long day. So, okay, other points. Okay, well I'll move that. So that is, I've lost my page now. So I'll move A through to G. If I have a seconder, anyone? Seconded by Councillor Clout. Any discussion? Okay, so I'll put that all in favour, say aye. Aye. Against? Okay, so that's, I'll do that by show of hands. All those in favour, myself, Councillor Mason, Councillor Brown, Councillor Malloy, and Baldock, and Clout, and Robson, and Granger, and Kurak, and Councillor Morris, and against, this is rather, yeah, Councillor Morris, and now Councillor Stewart. Okay, so that's carried. Thank you. Now, this is where I'll just take just a minute to work out what the next best thing to do is on the agenda. Okay, so that, because remember we've got certain things happening at 1 o'clock, so just give us a minute to sort that out. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll bring DC 45 forward, the CCO statements of intent. Okay, and we'll deal with that now. So that, no, I think I'll just use whatever powers. Yeah. Yeah, that's page 311. Yeah, because I did draw attention at the beginning that we'd probably need to do this, so, yeah, for the sake of efficient use of time.
Good morning, councillors. As you're aware, CCOs are required to file draft statement of intents by the 1st of March for comment by council before they are finalised a couple of months later. These drafts have been assessed against the letters of expectations for each of the CCOs by the CCO working group. As council will remember, the letters of expectations were approved by council in December 2018. So I'm going to pass you over to Anne now. Thanks.
Good morning, and apologies, Mohan's on his way down. I told him that it was quite a while before we would be on, so he's on his way to talk to the LGFA. Report if anybody has questions on that, but I can cover the first few before that. I'll take the report as read, but just some key things really, in that we met with the 3 main CCOs, so Bay Venues, Tourism Bay of Plenty, and the Art Gallery at the CCO working group meetings, and went through some of the feedback to their draft SOIs. Most of them are pretty much in line with what we've asked in the letter of expectation. There's just a few key changes that we would request that they will then get in a letter of feedback to us, and they'll return their final SOI to us at the end of June with those changes. So happy to answer any questions.
You, through the chair to Anne. With regards to Tourism BOP, with regards to their income, they've got revenue, and someone pointed out that it's actually a grant, so is it possible to have that written as a grant rather than just revenue? It makes it more transparent.
Yeah, we can certainly ask
Good.
for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, I would object to that, sorry. It's only one person's opinion.
We have a vote, Ms.
Yep.
Ritchie.
What
What
Tourism
is that? Yeah.
Bay of Plenty is an organisation with lots of streams of revenue. The council has, this particular council has a contract with them. They've got KPIs. They've got a whole range of other measures against it. It's a form of revenue. Tourism Bay of Plenty, for example, I mean, if we didn't, they are searching diligently for additional forms of revenue, and this is one. And I think that as soon as you use the word grant, and it's a matter of debate about whether it is grant or revenue, it becomes it takes away the commerciality and the commercial thinking, and it's just like it's something that's it's given. And I strongly believe that that if we want a commercial thinking through our CCOs, as we do, then we should be thinking in terms of expanding revenue sources, and it also what that does is it shows, if you look at all the different streams of revenue, that we are only one stream of revenue amongst all of them. So it's by saying it's a grant, it's mixing apples and pears with different revenues. So I think from an accounting perspective it is more accurate, and I'll take advice on that. But
Through the chair, may I just clarify, it wasn't to replace the word revenue totally, but like there's retail sales there, but just where the grants underneath that come, that they should be noted.
Yeah, so I took it, and it may alter your opinion, is that you'd show your revenue from, shall we say, commercial sources, and then your grant from public sources, shall we say, and would that be acceptable to you?
Ask an accountant what.
So through the chair, yes, you could disclose it. It will be in the total revenue category, and then the actual various elements of the revenue broken up. So you would specify that what is from grant and other, as we do with our annual report in terms of what we do in terms of the expenditure grants that we provide to CCO. So it would be consistent both ways. Yeah.
Well, if that was acceptable, I mean, I'm just trying to get a bit of an agreement around here. From my point of view, that would be good and quite open. But I'll go on to other speakers in case there's, especially anybody who disagrees with what I've just said. Councillor Clout.
Thank you. So on page 387 of the agenda, so revenue is the title, and underneath it has funding Tauranga City Council, funding Western Bay of Plenty District Council. So the word funding, I mean, I think that's fair if you want to replace that with grant. But as Councillor Mason said, we're not just handing over money like a grant would normally. You're actually handing over with a lot of strings attached and a lot of KPIs and expectations, and in the form of a contract. So to me, I don't see it as a straight out grant, but it says there funding. I'm pretty happy with that word.
Yeah, but just like funding there is, it does make it clear it's not revenue in the normal commercial sense. I'm okay. John and Larry?
Yeah, I think we need to be careful to avoid semantic discussions by people who don't have particular expertise in these areas, and we need to also ensure consistency. I note these are their documents. My strong recommendation would be we make very clear in our upcoming annual report what we give and for what purpose to everyone, so the public can understand what their council is doing. And I think that should be the focus for people who are looking for transparency around where the money is going. The focus should be very much on our annual report. Transparency being a key component of rebuilding trust and confidence in the public sector in this country, according to the Auditor General, or the new Auditor General. New brooms do make a difference, don't they?
I agree with those comments. I would hate to see us starting to tell opening tourism to change a couple of words here and there. I mean, you know, for what purpose really? This is their document. That chart on 387 is pretty clear. We don't need to have all the details there. If anyone wants to know the breakdown of the other revenue, you know, there's no indication anyone's going to hide it from you. But this is their document. We should leave it alone.
I do take the point too expressed by Councillor Robson that if it's our document, when we do our document, we've got to get that right, and that's So unless anybody wants to move anything particular, I think we've actually had quite a good discussion and ended up on probably on a similar position where we are, because in fact it uses the word funding there, and that sort of takes that.
I'm sorry, I can't let this go. This is, you know, one email from Perry Harlan this morning to the elected members saying, "This is to let you know I strongly object to the council handouts to be described as revenue. They should be described as grants." And one of our councillors is saying, just on the basis of this one email, that we should now call, you know, ask our CCO on the basis of a whole lot of, you know, relationship and legislation to change the way that they do their argument. And this is not the way to govern a city. I really don't think so.
We've reached a reasonable conclusion on it, and I don't think we're going any further with that. I think it's the point that's been made by Councillor Robson. When we do our documents, we want to make sure we get that right. But Councillor Kurak.
I think Mr. Harlan should read on page 386 under paragraph 10 or item 10, compensation from local authority. It does cover there a little bit of nuance in terms of what the money is there for. You know, it says here purchase of services from T-Box. So, you know, it does cover it off sufficiently for my comfort.
The points. Now I just want to check, because Mohan is coming to potentially talk about LGFA. So yeah, Mohan, if you want to, perhaps you might want to say a few words, or do you just want to field questions? Because LGFA is something that does come up in discussion from time to time with our council. Thanks.
They're pretty well on track. Profitability-wise compared to last SOI, is not much change from the previous one, in a good position. The equity goes up to about $100 million by the year 3, 25 million initial capital, and plus the retained earnings from then on. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
You've run all the way down here. Yeah, Councillor Robson. Yeah.
Just for the, you know, people present and perhaps those people listening across the world, the BVL numbers, the forecast, the reason that they're not able to, I notice everyone else has got their sort of 3 years in and BVL haven't, but they are our biggest, and some would say in some ways closest CCO. The reason that they've not been able to give us those numbers, not everyone goes to the CCO working group or...
So they haven't got their budgets finalised. They have now. They had a board meeting at the beginning of the month where they were finalising the budgets. So they could have, we would have them this week actually, the budgets for the next 3 years.
So they could be tabled today, or?
Yes, I will get those for you. Yes.
It would be nice to have them as close to, you know,
yes.
needs, accepting these as possible.
Yeah.
Somebody prepared to the move? That's DC 45. Yeah, Councillor Mason, and seconded by Councillor Baldock. Want to speak to it at all, Councillor Mason?
Oh, just very briefly, I think the CCOs are working really well. I'd like to commend staff on their relationships with and the management of those relationships particularly. We have at the board level, we'll deal with late and confidential the changes to the boards there potentially, and yeah, I think we're in a good place with our CCOs. Especially, I think if you look at BVL and the forward thinking that they're doing, it's not just looking at the present, but also some in the statement of intent some very exciting forward projects and strategies. So I think we're in a good place, and very happy to support the motion.
Support those comments by the chair of the CCO working group. Just a brief comment on Bay of Plenty tourism and the article in the paper this morning about the end of the cruise ship season. $91 million of revenue into the area. When some of us were on the Celebrity Solstice visit, we were told that they actually do all their provisioning, all of their ships do all of their provisioning in the port here, and that they actually take on board $33 million worth of beef and chicken alone during the cruise ship season. So that 90 million actually is probably based on the spend of the passengers. There is far greater benefit to the city from that cruise ship operation, and I think we owe we need to give thanks to Bay of Plenty Tourism who manage that. And the question still gets raised, that they need to see that visitor information centre to support the work they do. The costs of putting that one on the port side is considerable and has a limited lifespan. So I'd just like to note those comments. I hope we will somehow see that established in the very near future to support this work. We are very fortunate to have the port there where the cruise ships can just walk off, and it's rating internationally as one of the better destinations in the surveys done by the ships, all of the different companies, that this is a very, very high profile and successful operation that's run here.
I mean, the door's been opened, so I can't resist making the comment that one wonders why we then need to spend $4 million putting a building there when we're so far in front of everyone else. But that's not the reason that I raised my hand and wished to speak. The CCO working group, it is a tough job, and I'd like to thank Councillors Mason and Baldock and Malloy and Clout for taking it on. I did it last training. It is tough work. I'd also like to thank Anne Blakeway. I turned up to one meeting. Her knowledge in detail and her coverage, her work done in this area is, I think, exemplary. It was a pleasure to go to a meeting and see someone so across their topic. So that was good. That being said, so that's the operation. There are tensions between ourselves and our CCOs, between BBL's visions and perhaps the visions of our community and the visions of ourselves. We must never forget those. We mustn't hide them. We must make sure that these differences are publicly aired, respectfully aired. We work our way to good solutions. But just to put on record, it is a tough gig, that CCO working group. There's a lot of detail. You're across 4 very, very different organisations. They're all highly politicised. So Max, especially to you in some ways, because I think you took an informal lead there at some level, or maybe even a formal lead. It's a tough gig, so well done. Thank you.
I want to echo those comments and thank you to my colleagues for putting their hands up to do this work for us, and then for us to see the fruit of your work and hopefully approve it. A lot of reading involved, backwards and forwards between the CCOs, and putting the shareholders' view to them and dealing with their response, and then back again. And my thanks for that additional work that you've done on our behalf. Thank you.
Okay, any other speakers? Well, yeah, I'll just join in those thanks. Really, the only main person I have to do with is Anne, and I would like to echo those comments. All the reports are written very well, and it makes it easy for us to understand. I think that sometimes there are tensions between council and its CCOs, but I think that's a healthy thing, actually. Unless we're a rubber stamper, and in which case, instead of having a council, maybe we have a CCO. So, and I don't moot that. So, I think the idea of us toing and froing and constructive disagreement occasionally is absolutely fine. So, It was interesting to hear about the money spent on chicken and beef by those cruise ships. It was fascinating, and I'm actually looking forward to the contribution of those organisations towards perhaps the proposed disembarkation centre. Would actually be very helpful to help us with that. Other speakers, Councillor Malloy.
Yeah. Just to echo those sentiments around Councillor Mason and Anne, I think Max has done a fantastic job in chairing. I'd also like to comment too that I think we're incredibly lucky that the calibre of the directors that we've got on those boards, they provide a dimension to our city, I believe, that we wouldn't have if we didn't have them, and I think it's incredibly important.
Clarification, point of information, and it's in relation to a point raised earlier and perhaps the email from Perry Harlan. The funding for Tourism Bay of Plenty comes from commercial rate, is that correct? Not from the residential ratepayer? So I think we just need to be very clear on that, because sometimes, you know, and again it comes back to our annual report, we need to be very clear when we talk about where money's coming from and where it's going to, exactly who's paying for what. There was an excellent pickup recently by a colleague, Your Worship, and I think Councillor Baldock, on a bridge that went across State Highway 36, and there was some concern about who paid how much for it, and when that information was made clear in public, people get a different view. So not everything that the city provides is actually paid for by the residential ratepayer. We need more clarity around these things so we can have informed conversations with our community.
Yeah, no, just thank you to all councillors for the support of that, and I think we've increased our feedback and communication with all councillors in respect of that, and we'll continue to do so. Just to say, I think a highlight of the day would be when Chairman Peter Farmer from BVL comes to give us for us to express our thanks for his 6 years service, and I think he'll probably tell a few war stories, I imagine, and about the relationship and all the rest of it. So I think it'll be pertinent to really listen to him carefully, because he'll give us a really good insight into the relationship with the council and sort of the ups and downs of BVL and how it's been going over the last few years. So that'll be, I think, a very important thing to listen to today. So thank you.
Okay, so I'll put that all in favour, say aye. Aye. Against, that's carried. Now, it's rightly been, Peter Farmer is coming along for us to recognise the fact he is retiring, but I'm not sure exactly when. So, and there's no actual agenda item. So, rather than, now we've got half an hour before lunch, so I was going to propose we go into confidential now and deal with those items, then we can resume, and when Peter comes, that will just be an informal time of council. And then at 1 o'clock is the Bella Vista MB speaker, followed by the 4 project reviews. So that's back in public again. So I need a mover and a seconder to go into confidential. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Kraut. All in favour say aye. Against, that's carried. So we're just now